You are here for Upskilling for the Future on Business and Leadership. My name is Sarita Solz. I'm the Senior Director for Career Education and Coaching for Working Professionals and Alumni at the McCombs School of Business. And what that means is that I work with students and a team of coaches who work with Dallas MBA, Houston MBA, Evening MBA here in Austin, MSTC, MSBA Online, our new program, as well as McCombs alumni. So yes, my title's long, but I would say the programs I work with are just the best. So no impartiality here at all. I did want to quickly review the schedule and logistics for this morning. So we're going to spend about 30 to 40 minutes on discussion with our distinguished panelists here. Listeners can submit questions via the chat. And then we will spend about the last 20 to 30 minutes answering as many of your questions as possible. So what I'm going to do now is introduce our panelists. So I wanted to start with Ethan Burris. He's the university's Senior Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and a faculty member in both the McCombs School of Business and at the Dell Medical School, where he teaches on topics such as leadership, managing power and politics, leading groups and teams, and negotiations. Ethan is also co-director of the Center for Leadership and Ethics. Welcome, Ethan.
Thanks so much for having me, Sarita.
All right, and Mike Macker leads the university's Center for Health Communication, a joint initiative of the Moody College of Communication and Dell Medical School. The center's Health Communications Leadership Institute teaches current and aspiring health communication leaders about strategies and best practices for leadership management and innovation. In addition, Mike holds faculty appointments in the Department of Population Health and the Stan Richards School of Advertising and Public Relations. Thanks so much for being here today, Mike.
Glad to be here.
And Trent Thurman is the Assistant Dean and Director of Executive Education for the LBJ School of Public Affairs. In this dual role, Trent leads the school's executive education programs, including the Executive Masters in Public Leadership, which prepares working nonprofit and public sector professionals for senior leadership. And also the Governor's Center for Management Development, which focuses on the development of leaders and improving organizational effectiveness in state and local organizations. Thanks, Trent, for joining us this morning.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
Okay. All right. So we're going to get started. So really, let me just introduce the topic. And as we mentioned, it really is about upskilling for the future. So as we know, the world and workplaces have become connected and transparent. Globalization creates opportunities to engage more diverse perspectives, and the issues facing organizations feel like they're getting more complex every day. Digital disruption of business models was already creating major new opportunities as well as challenges before the pandemic. With the pandemic, every organization and leaders at all levels needed to pivot to adapt and develop new strategies for communicating, team building, delivering education to our students. So with that in mind, we will get started with our first question. So first question is how have leadership styles and approaches evolved to include more empathetic and understanding perspectives? And I'm going to start with asking Ethan if he could provide some insight and comments on that.
Thanks, Rita. Well, as you say, we're kind of living in a weird time. So it's post-pandemic. We have lots of challenges from return to the physical office to, how to work in this virtual environment, how to work within teams. And, I think at its basic core, most jobs are really a blend of applying your technical skills or knowledge around some area, but then you actually have to get along with other people in order to get work done. And so within the field of management, and a lot of research in organizational behavior, it goes back, well over a century now. And they basically look at the work that's being performed as this blend of both kind of task skills. So those that are associated with performing kind of the core functions of your job, but then those that are also more relationship oriented. And so for your tasks, you have things like accountability, there's marketing, there's accounting, there's finance. Mike here is going to talk in a sec about not only communications, but those that are specific within the healthcare space. I mean, there's there's lots of things that are important for doing your job. But at some point in time, especially if you want to accelerate in your career, you're going to reach a point where it's not you doing the work. You're going to be managing a team, you're going to be working with a team, and your job is to get work done through other people. And that by necessity involves building those relationships in a functional way. So if you're going to get work done through others, you need to generate some motivation and some buy-in for the things that you want to accomplish. You need to lead change and coordinate a number of folks, not only within kind of your local team, but those across the organization in order to accomplish those tasks. And so, the way we kind of talk about things within the business school is not just developing a set of technical skills to advance like the tasks at hand, but the people-oriented skills in order to assemble that type of energy and commitment to see things through. And so empathy and that type of perspective taking are certainly core skills that are really foundational to establishing those types of effective relationships. So certainly we can talk about some of the needs, and challenges of today, but these are really evergreen skills that we can go back and look at a long history of research as not only pointing to their importance, but then looking at the particular skills and actions and activities you can engage in order to demonstrate that type of empathetic and leadership style of perspective taking that will advance your career.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
it's funny hearing Ethan talk about kind of technical skills versus like all that, like the soft skills and the communication around teamwork. In March 2020, all of a sudden, a lot of people started to realize that how we communicate about health was important, and those of us had been doing it for a while, kind of already knew that. But while we were trying to do that, like, how do we apply what we are really good at? I think part of being kind of a good empathetic leader, part of it was in my role here, I knew, and I had people reaching out like, what is the Center for Health Communication going to do to support public health on campus and across Texas? Like, that was a thing. And, my folks were being pushed hard on like doing their normal job while trying to, survive the start of a global pandemic. And as a leader, and I have a deputy director, Jessica Hughes Wagner, who we very much co-lead, was like, we were pretty sure the right answer wasn't going to be develop the world's like millionth 6-foot graphic. Like, that was not going to feel rewarding or like it was making a difference to the people on our team to be like, do something extra right now. And so we sort of crowdsourced in our team what we could do and feel like we were doing something meaningful. And so we started looking for really good examples in the world that we thought made sense from like a health comm theory reason. And then sharing that with practitioners to say, hey, like, we think this one's a really good one. Here's why. And our whole team felt some ownership of seeing the good graphic go by on social media. And like, so it was an entire team effort to feel like we were doing something productive and helpful in an area where our technical skills came into play. The other thing was I was actively, and we were all like trying to find like, what were other people doing to like be functional, good teammates during, especially those early months of COVID, when when it became clear this wasn't going to be a sprint, it was going to be a marathon. Like, how do we do that? And so we started leaning into things like our team already had a birthday buddy program where it's like, you're responsible to make someone's birthday fun in different ways. And then we just figured out ways to make that work during COVID. And so we did, scavenger hunts around the house. And if your kids were there, your kids got to participate, like ways we could lean into things we could never have done before, stealing in from kind of what other people on campus were doing or other organizations. And so like a lot of, I think that empathy came from crowdsourcing a lot of those things to kind of find things that would work within the context of our team. And now how do we do that now that we're back in the real world and actually see each other as physical people again? So.
Yeah, that's a great example.
And to build on that, I think one thing we saw through the pandemic and continue to see with the increase in people working remotely is that focus on employee well-being. I mean, clearly there are benefits to remote working. I saw a survey where 99% of people said they would like to continue to work remotely at least part of the time. But there are some drawbacks. I mean, the loneliness and isolation you can get, the so the blurred lines between working at home and your personal life. You don't get that water cooler informal networking anymore. And with that, the recognition of what you're doing. So I think it's important that leaders focus on employee well-being and, recognizing the importance of prioritizing their well-being and that culture of work-life balance, and, providing for mental health and wellness.
Yeah, Trent, regarding that and focusing on their well-being, I think one of the key things that leaders need to be is an active listener. And that's kind of what we do when we do coaching for our students here, is to be active listeners and meet them where they are so that we can support them.
But just to kind of build on that a little bit, so Microsoft released their Workforce Trends Index. It's been a couple months ago now, and one of the surprising statistics, and it connects to that desire to work from home. So most employees, when you ask them, are you as effective working at home as you are in the office? About 87% of employees say that they are. But then if you ask their boss, how much do you trust your employees working at home full time rather than the office? That statistic is 12%. And so it goes right back to this sense of empathy and perspective taking, that we trust ourselves to be as effective and get all of our work done at home. But now all of a sudden, if you can't see someone and you can't, check on them and measure that sense of accountability and know what they're doing, man, it's tough. And so, to me, that's leadership right there, is to be able to put in structures and processes in place in order to manage some dynamics that are ever more important now than they've ever been.
And just the importance of trust building across your teams too, and creating that safe space for that. Yeah, thank you. All right, well, we'll go on to question number 2. So it is, what do you see as the major challenges facing leaders today? And I'll start with Mike.
Sure. So in the context of like my advertising teaching life here too, advertisers and marketers as a field often just kind of chase shiny objects on the ground. And so, every semester my students have some technology or some new platform that's the answer no matter what problem they're being faced with. And so I remember the MySpace semester and the Foursquare semester and the, all the things. And so I purposely use a book that's like 20 years out of date when I teach that class, where it's like computers now have color monitors. This has tremendous implications for advertising. And my students are like, what are you doing to us right now? And I'm like, I'm teaching you how to be an advertising problem solver, not like really good at Twitter or TikTok or whatever the thing is right then. And I think a real challenge, like at least in the fields I know the best, is how to differentiate as a leader between the shiny object versus the thing that really has potential to change the way we're doing our work and the work that we're putting out into the world. And so I'm sure at this point, my team is extremely tired of me talking about generative AI, but the way those tools have potential for the way we do our jobs and personalized health information at scale, like I think there's something there that's really important. And like, I'm going to keep pushing on it because I think that's there. And I think that's a challenge with the pace of technology that's just going to become more and more of a thing, is like, how do you identify the trend that's real versus the fake thing you could waste a lot of energy and resources on for your whole team, and at the end of it have a whole lot of nothing to show for it. And so I think how you do that and how you think through that and build in feedback from your team, so you're not chasing around in circles, like you're going after the stuff that really matters, I think is a big deal right now. It's only going to become bigger in the coming years.
Any other thoughts from the panelists?
Well, I think a few other things, and we sort of touched on this already, but managing change. I mean, given just the rapid growth of technology and the way we do work, I mean, a big challenge is how you can effectively manage change in the organization, because, if no one or a lot of people don't like change, and in order to do it effectively, you need to have everyone on board and showed the need and the sense of urgency to pursue that. So I think that's going to be one of the main challenges going forward, is how do you effectively manage change in your organization to be successful.
And so I was at a conference the beginning of last week, and it had about 150 CHROs and CEOs, large companies, but also small as well. And I'll say the major themes among all those leaders were digital transformation, inflation, layoffs that are happening across many different sectors of the economy, and this little thing called artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, which is completely changing how we are doing work. And so all these things are kind of providing a confluence of challenges for leaders, especially in the relationships with their employees. Employees are feeling like they can be laid off at any time, that they're replaceable by machines. And, the challenges of them accomplishing the work are just far different. And that changes their relationship with their organizations. So kind of with a broad brushstroke, a lot of employees are a lot more transactional now than, developing that deep sense of commitment and loyalty to each of their organizations. And so I think, one of the major challenges of leaders is, we've been promising things like, work is a sense of purpose and doing meaningful work and all this kind of stuff. And, by and large, a lot of those promises can come off quite empty if people feel like they can be replaced by others or laid off, or, there's challenges with inflation and the economy and such. And so once again, to me, it goes back to those relationships that leaders are able to forge with their employees. And how do you effectively do that when there's all these other types of pressures going on now that seem to make that relationship with the organization simply a transaction to, get some money and provide a life at home. People want to build a career. They want to advance and develop new skills and grow. And so as an organization, how do you promise those things when, there's, as Trent mentioned, so much massive change that's going on with the way work is actually being done?
Yeah, it's like as a leader, you have to perform, you have to transform, and you have to connect. So it's not just performing anymore, it's transforming and then connecting with your employees to really create that purpose and vision and motivation. So there's a lot more challenges today. Okay, so we'll go to number 3. So how do those challenges manifest differently in varied industries and between the private and public sectors? I'll start with Trent on this one.
Thanks, Sarita. I think some of the core skills are the same across industry. Things like strategic thinking, adaptability, communication, and things like that. But I do think there are differences that leaders have to face. And I'll go back to my previous example about managing change. In the tech space, that change may just be technology itself and how things are rapidly changing. But in the public sector space, for students that I have here at LBJ, it may be political priorities, budget constraints, this changes in the political wind, so to speak. I think with teams, something we've talked about already, and the difficulty in building and managing teams, that can be a difference too. In the tech space, again, if retention may be a big part of that team, where in the public sector space, it may be more, civil servant rules and regulations that impact and make it more difficult to have a team. And I think another thing too is just, navigating uncertainty. Given the industry, think of energy, for example, where, oil prices may dictate what's happening, where in the public sector space, it could be an election or, again, just the political winds and things like that. So while I do think that the core leadership skills are relevant across industries, there are differences just based on, what's happening at the time.
Yeah, I'll pretty much say exactly what Trent said. There's a set of underlying skills that really transfer across industries, job types, different sorts of organizations. Obviously, being within the business school, almost all of our placements are in the private sector, but there's still a wealth of diversity and variety of different types of jobs and industries. Working at Goldman Sachs on Wall Street is far different from a tech company on the West Coast, is far different from, a new venture in, the beverage industry in Dallas, Texas. Like, each of those couldn't be far different from one another. And in some cases, we create assignments and such that force students to operate under different constraints. So we'll ask them to consult with a nonprofit company that may have different budgetary constraints than, Goldman Sachs's budget. But every organization faces constraints in some way. They face political pressures in other ways. They face challenges in managing their people. And so a lot of the underlying skill sets are quite similar. What we talk a lot more about is under what conditions are there features or characteristics of different types of organizations that would lead you to lean into some types of styles or approaches or what have you more so than others. And so that kind of strategic decision making about how you lean into different approaches becomes a lot more important rather than a qualitative change in underlying skill set.
And I would go ahead.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, something Ethan said really hit me, because talking about all organizations work under constraints, I think where I think when I hear this question is that difference between public and private sector. Because in a lot of ways, the way that our Center for Health Communication operates, I tell people outside UT, in a lot of ways we operate like a very highly qualified health ad agency hiding within UT, because we do a lot of work where we are developing, implementing, evaluating public health campaigns for the state of Texas or different partners. And there's times that's so in some ways we're almost like a private company, but we're operating within a public institution in terms of who usually does this kind of work. And so you bump into things where the processes of a public institution do not move as fast as they would within an ad agency. And that can be really frustrating for the people trying to do the work. It's why is that happening the way it is? Well, because we're a state institution and not. But then finding the ways to leverage the real strengths that come from being part of a public institution that you wouldn't get to be if you were in a more private setting. So I really spend a lot of time thinking about that particular difference of public versus private. And I think that the idea of how do you lean as hard as you can into the strengths of wherever you are, or the strengths of those where we don't have constraints that other people might have, to Ethan's way of framing it. And then try to figure out how to navigate or mitigate the constraints you do have on you. But let's take advantage where we don't have constraints that other people might, I think can be one way to help a team get excited and pursuing that work.
Yeah, I love that. And I would say, I just would add too, from a career perspective, what we also like to do is talk with folks about what is the best culture that will make you thrive. Are you going to get frustrated that the pace is slow? Do you really like a faster paced environment? Maybe tech is the best place for you if that's the case. Do you embrace change versus do you not embrace change? So that all of those kind of things kind of fit into also what we like to talk about students regarding what could be their long-term career goals and their roadmap as they think about their career. All right, so we're going to go on to the next question, which is, what can organizations and current leadership do now to help prepare the leaders of tomorrow? And we'll start with you, Ethan.
So I guess in one word, the thing that comes to mind first and foremost is this concept of investment. So one of the very first budget items to go in a down economy is investments in what are seen as optional trainings, workshops, skill development, growth programs in the organization's people and employees. And there's always a balance and attention between expending money now on growth and development programs, because that payoff is sometime down the line. But if you don't do that, then down the line you're going to be impeding yourself and your organization's ability to thrive and be successful. And so there's been a number of studies that have essentially started to assess and evaluate how much investment in kind of people-oriented activities are organizations engaging in, and then looking at both short-term and long-term financial outcomes of doing so. And of course, in a down economy, there's some very short-term implications where it can be costly. But over a long period of time, those investments in people, and especially in developing those sets of skills and competency areas, can really pay off over the long term. And so the last thing I'll say is kind of flip this question a little bit, and that's also I would assume that many of our folks that are joining today are not only in charge of these massive, budgets for tuition and things like that to come to a place like UT, but you may also have to engage in that little bit of selling process yourself to try and convince your leaders that this would be a worthwhile effort. And so, the other thing that I would encourage folks to do is really think about that value proposition for yourself. So what are those skill sets that you would like to learn? How does that impact and advance your career in some way? And for the organization that you work for, what's the benefit? What did they get out of that type of investment in you that can eventually turn into a payoff for them and for the teams that you ultimately lead? And if you can start to compellingly articulate that, now it's not just a matter of preparing you to lead and advancing your own career, but there's a benefit back to the organization that you work for and are hopefully investing in you.
Yeah, I think this idea of like building a culture of learning and investing in folks is really important. We one of the ways every year some of my professorship kind of internal funds we make available to our team, and it's like to go to conferences or take workshops or all the things they might want to do to kind of build their own skills within our team. And one of the conditions is you have to, at one of our next team meetings, share what you learned. And so like one person takes a Google UX course, well, they're going to tell everybody else what they learned and some of the high points. And so, everyone likes that because you could be like, oh, that's what that person learned about. Like, because for people who do completely different jobs, a graphic designer compared to one of our research team members, like they're doing radically different things. And you get to just get a feel for what people's jobs are through doing that. And I couldn't help but see Ariel's note here in the question about how do you convince people to do this? Because if you worry they're going to leave afterwards, at least within our group, like I don't view it as a failure. If someone has gotten so much better at their job that they outgrow their position and our organization's ability to kind of keep giving them chances to grow and they leave, like I'm sad for people to leave, but we as a group like celebrate that too. It's like, we help that person grow, thrive, do a new thing in their career. Like I think that helps support that idea. And then you get to look for a new person who you get to train up and benefit from new ideas. And so it's someone leaving because you help them grow faster than you could keep them in your own place is not necessarily a negative thing.
And to build on that, I definitely agree that it has to start with that culture of learning, that let people take risk and learn from that. But I also think, emphasizing soft skills and something we've already talked about, but as routine tasks become more and more routine through things like ChatGPT and things like that, I think there'll be the added importance of soft skills, emotional intelligence, communication that are just going to continue to be more and more important. So from an organizational standpoint, focusing on those soft skills.
And one of the things I would like to add too is just this idea of increasing your own self-awareness. So help yourself as a leader increase it, then helps your teammates and the future leaders. So if you can help your direct reports, your teams increase self-awareness, then that's helpful too as you think about even the soft skills. All right, so we have one more question before we're going to go ahead and open it up to the Q&A, even though Mike, thanks so much for answering some of them already. Why do leaders, regardless of whether they are new or old to the position, need to upskill now and expect to reskill later? So Mike, we'll start with you.
Sure. No, I'll throw a link in the chat if people want to see it, but it reminds me of one of my favorite articles ever from like 10, 15 years ago from Atul Gawande. It's called The Coach in the Operating Room. And he talks about how like his performance had plateaued. He was like watching a football game or something, watching some extremely highly qualified athlete be like yelled at by a coach. And he's like, well, wait a minute. Like, why is no one giving me feedback on what I'm doing? And so that idea of self-awareness is really important. And we actually, since at UT, have developed like a whole campus-based peer observation teaching program that's specifically designed to like let other people come in and watch you teach and talk about teaching afterwards. And so that idea of like you're never done learning, even when you're a leader, I think is really helpful. And that article is just such a nice view of like you're never actually done learning and improving, and you just have to find the people who can give you feedback on things that you want to get better at. One of my surgeon friends at the med school, he has a term that I just happily stole and share, is making people consciously incompetent. Because physicians talk all day long to people who they kind of have like a power dynamic over. So then you could be like, I'm great at communicating. I do it all day and everyone seems happy with me. And so a trick that he has learned in his work is like, how do you help make people aware where they could be better? And so that idea of like the coaching thing is just something I just love. We work on a lot. And I think it's something leaders, any leader benefit from.
So I'll share a stat from a McKinsey report, and that's that 375 million people will need to change their job category by 2030. And a lot of those jobs haven't even been invented yet. So I think that just shows the necessity for upskilling and making sure that, you know, you're on the right track. You're going to get left behind, both the individual and the organization. So just the rapid changes in technology and how we work necessitate upskilling.
I guess to build on both of those themes, again, I'm not going to say anything too terribly different, but I think for every single person, we all have strengths and weaknesses. Everybody does. And I think one of the questions I would be asking myself, or if I was leading a team, what the questions I would be asking, you know, my team members, you know, are the areas of weakness causing derailment? Are you unable to get things done with other people because of some blind spot that you have yourself? Well, if that's the case and you're seeing some tension in your own work, well, those are things to grow and learn and develop. But much the same, you know, and going back to Mike's point, because you've developed a strength in some area, because Atul Gawande is an excellent physician, it doesn't mean that he should stop working on being an excellent physician. There's still ways to grow and develop in those core areas of strength. And those things can be differentiating for you. So avoiding derailment is avoiding failures, but differentiating on strength is developing a competitive advantage for yourself that no other employee, no other leader can imitate. And so at any point in time in someone's career, you have that choice about how you're going to allocate your time and growth and development strategies for yourself. And both should be, you should be aware of both of those strategies and really lean into them, kind of depending on some of the tensions or strengths that you've observed in your own career.
Yeah, and I would add, just from coaching thousands of executives and MBAs, et cetera, I can't think of anyone who hasn't had hills and valleys in their career. We actually show a chart that says you're not going to be going like this on a linear path to your career goal. It's going to be up and down and up and down. And so, as so many of you mentioned, one of the things that we always say is first take stock of your current skills and then know where you want to go, right? Because then some skills might be more important versus others. And then know if you're stuck or not, which is what Ethan was kind of commenting on, which is there something I'm doing that isn't working? And then what we tend to do regarding career coaching is then look at the gaps and decide what's urgent and help you develop that roadmap so that you move forward. So anyway, thank you so much for all of that, because we know how important it is to continue to upskill, and we know that reskilling will most likely be needed too. All right, so I think we're now ready to go ahead and open it up to the Q&A from the audience. So we're looking forward to hearing some of your questions.
Yes, we've received quite a few. They were coming in throughout the course of the conversation, so we're going to backtrack a little bit. Scott Joan asks, how do you build that sense of commitment or loyalty for employees in a world where work is so transactional now?
Well, first thing I'll say, it's a great question. And if you have the answer to that, I think you can write a book and do quite well for yourself. I think if you go back to kind of core theories of motivation, they talk about motivation as sort of having a crowding out phenomenon. So if you emphasize the extrinsic, so money, career advancement, things like that, it can crowd out kind of that internal motivation, that sense of joy and commitment and desire to develop mastery over a particular skill set or task at hand. And so I think for leaders, it is kind of a fine balance. Emphasize the transactions enough to take some of the basic, necessities of a job off the table. So come to work, we should pay you fairly for the work that you do. But after that, don't emphasize that transaction near as much. There's other things you can do to start to build that sense of commitment or loyalty that extends beyond just a paycheck. And so I guess at its core, I wouldn't view this as sort of a one-time deal or conversation. You can start off with that a little bit more of a transaction to get them in the door, but then, most of the other activities and relationships you develop should really be about the person as a human being and their desire to grow and develop and all the other things that really engender that sense of purpose and loyalty.
And essentially the same thing, but intrinsic rewards can be as simple as a thank you or a pat on the back, yet they can be very powerful and extend beyond just the transaction to, making you feel more of a part of the team and the organization. And again, that doesn't cost you anything. It's building that trust and appreciation for what the person does.
Something else that I think is important is, something our team does every couple of years basically is revisit like, where are we going to be in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and kind of rethinking like mission statement values, some of those things, but then really putting it into practice. So like one of the key things in our center is a lot of folks from backgrounds in public health and medicine, like the idea of like equity in health is really important to a lot of folks. And we don't want it to be like one word of 6 we list on a slide with our values. And so it's on like team meeting agendas. It's like, it is built as a process into a lot of things. So it's not just nice people assuming good things will happen, but really putting into practice one of those key values that like as a group, everyone has agreed is really essential to what we're doing. And I think that does help when times are hard or when things are a little bit more stressful. It's like, oh wait, we're all in this for the same reason. Like I'm going to be more patient with my teammate who is just short with me, or like all those things that happen when people work together. I think having that shared thing that you're actually like putting into practice and showing how it's part of the work can really help a lot when things are a little tougher sometimes.
And one of the things that we did on our team is we actually asked our team members, what is it that would make you feel more connected? And what is it that you would like? And so because of that, we actually start our meetings with appreciation and gratitude for each other. And then we also have made a purposefully meeting in person and sharing a meal to continue to build the trust. And that was based on, for example, my team saying this is what they wanted to kind of create more of that connection.
Okay, thank you. Revisiting the idea of investing in individuals or your team and the concern perhaps at the organization level about them then leaving, using those skills somewhere else. How do you combat that idea? What is the argument that you build for funding upskilling, either yourself or your teammates at your organization?
Okay, I'll draw the short end of the straw again. So I think this question actually it connects back to the previous question about how to avoid kind of that transactional feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll give one very quick example of a couple companies and some newer HR strategies for how they both recruit and then develop their employees. So there's a few different organizations now that you will see in their advertisements for job descriptions and to try and recruit people, especially into entry roles. they will promise almost immediately that you'll be in this role for 1 to 2 years only. And that their goal is for you to actually attrit, to turn over and move on from the organization at the end of that time. You see this a lot in consulting, for instance. They ask people to come and join for a 2 or 3 year stint before the expectation is they will move on from the organization after that. Now, ironically, what ends up happening for a lot of these organizations is, even though it starts off in a very kind of transactional type of relationship, come here, work really hard for 2 years, and then we'll help you exit the organization. What they end up doing is investing in those employees quite a bit, training, exposure, and kind of rotations around the company, investing in the development of particular skill sets. And the promise is, we're going to place you into a much better job at the end of those 2 years. But what actually ends up happening is those employees end up staying within the organization a bit longer. Because what starts off as sort of that transactional relationship, come and work and then expect to move on, actually develops into something much, much more. And so, for companies who fear investing in employees, ironically, what it could be is that by investing in your employees in these types of skills and development and, that type of planning, you couldn't end up keeping your employees that much longer than by, trying to save a few bucks and not deploy these types of investments to begin with.
The only thing I'll add on top of what I had said earlier too is I think the idea of reputation of the organization matters a lot. I mean, it's so word of mouth of do you want to work there or not? Is that a good place or not? And depending on the kind of field you're in, you can also benefit from those folks who technically have left your organization, but are still doing work in your area. I have, and it's different as faculty, certainly, than lots of other jobs, but I still have multiple research projects going right now with people who have left our actual team to go pursue graduate degrees other places. And so I still see them, I still talk to them, we help grow them and get them to the next phase of their life and career. I still get to benefit from that. And and they still get to work with us. So I don't think it's just thinking of the upsides. People are going to leave anyway, no matter what you do. People are not taking jobs for 50 years anymore. Lean into it and take advantage of it rather than fear you're going to make people better at their jobs and they might leave.
So this happens all the time. Sorry, trying to jump back in, but this happens all the time, especially in consulting. So they stay in consulting for those couple of years, then they exit and go to usually one of their clients. And what ends up happening immediately, that client sends all their business back to the consulting firm. So there's actually, a business case to be made to invest in those folks, let them go, build that reputation as a great organization from where to work. But also it ends up driving additional business back to those organizations as well.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly add the cost of replacement. If retention should be your goal, and like Mike said, I mean, people are going to leave. They're not going to stick around for 30, 40 years anymore. But, it costs on average 50 to 60% of a salary to replace someone. So since the question was for a company, I mean, keep that in mind and, use it as a retention tool.
Okay, I'm going to translate a little bit or Melanie Connolly's comments and question. She was talking about ebb and flow in careers over the course of time and how, you want to be doing as the best job possible, but kind of running uphill is just going to wear you out. How can you manage ups and downs, and particularly when thinking about reskilling yourself and gaining new skills while also trying to continue to be excellent in your job? Any advice for folks looking at those situations?
I'll spare Ethan not having to go first every time. It's something I think that begins with the interview process. Honestly, we've as on our team, we've worked really hard early on to be why us? What is bringing you? Why are you interested in this position? And we've had designers who basically outright say I'm really tired of selling potato chips, or whatever the thing is they were working on. The idea of using their skills and what they're good at in service of public health is a really consistent answer we get because of the work that we do. And so then like we know walking the door, it's like, oh, you're like, you're in this because you care about sort of the end outcome of the work. And it's not just, I can make things that are beautiful or help sell stuff. Like we're selling behavior change and health and helping people support that. And so I think it really begins with being clear, like what we care about as an organization, asking interview questions that can help us find some of those early signs of like, oh, that's a person who's going to buy in when they're here, is really helpful. And earlier we were talking about like constraints of organization. We have learned, like for us, like you might think UT and think a little slower academic public sector. It's like we are a startup. Like that's how things are going to work here. So they know it's going to be kind of frustrating at times to be like bumping up against those constraints that we hit all the time in our work. And so it's really starts to me, I think, very much with the interview process to find that early fit where they're going to walk in and know what they're getting themselves into. I think is really important to Melanie's question.
Let's see, there was one more. This is kind of a general one, both in leadership positions and as a member of a team. When we think about reskilling, there are so many options right now. You could do a workshop, you could do an online class, there are entire degree programs or certificate programs, boot camps. What are y'all seeing that has the most impact on a career right now with the rapid pace of change and skills needed?
I'll jump in. So Ethan and Mike don't have to take the first. I think it depends. I think it depends on the individual's goals and the alignment with it. I'll give a couple of examples. I recently at a previous role was over an executive MBA program, and one of our applicants, great applicant, after the interview realized that probably was a better fit for a short certificate program based on what he needed to take that next step. So I think it's really aligning the programs with your goals and what you're trying to achieve. And in some cases that will be a degree program. In some cases, it could be just an online thing like Coursera or something like that. Others could be a certificate program. So I think just making sure that the program that you're researching aligns with your goals and that will help you achieve where you're trying to go is the best approach. So yeah, it just depends.
Well, only thing I'll add on top of that, just to again kind of build on Trent's theme of goals. Are you a career switcher? Have you had 20 years working in marketing, but now all of a sudden you want to be a lawyer? Well, you probably need to go back for a full degree. Or even if it's still within business, moving from marketing to accounting or being in strategy, that it could require a pretty significant shift. And therefore, not only do you need lots of skills and competence in those technical areas, but a degree also allows some signaling to your market. So when you go apply for these other jobs, you can tell a more compelling story about your career arc and sort of those next steps. Other types of goals are real specific around the skill set. So do you need to learn in data science and predictive modeling in order to advance your career? Well, for that type of very specific skill, a number of hours, whether it be a day, a couple of days, or a full-blown week program around data science could get you those skills enough to be able to be conversant and actually apply those skills in your role. And so they're a shorter program, whether it be a certificate or a non-degree executive education class, those could be all that you need. And so that becomes a much financially feasible option compared to a full-blown degree, let alone all the time and investment that's associated with it. The one that is a big question, at least in my mind, are all the themes that we've been talking about today, which is everything around soft skills. There are very few tips and tricks that I can give you in a 20-minute TED Talk type of style that's going to change fundamentally the way that you manage others. So what I would highly recommend around something like that is a series of classes or even a full-blown degree that allows you the time to acquire those skills, practice, assess, get feedback, fail, try again. Like there's a lot of involvement in that. And it's not just a simple, light switch where before you didn't know about statistics and well, now you know a little bit more.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. It depends based on what all of you said, and is it a transformative experience that you're looking for, which usually relates to soft skills and leadership, then that takes time and it takes applying it. It's like you've got to test and learn and prototype and think about it as an experiment rather than a one class. It takes a little bit of time.
And Sarita, if I could add one thing, even if you determine that a degree is the way you want to go, then you need to look at the various options within degree programs. I mean, for some people, Ethan made the example about making a major shift. I mean, you may want to go through a full-time program, so you can take those electives and really take a deep dive into what you're wanting to do. Or in other cases, it may be more of an executive or professional format program that just gives you that foundation across all the disciplines.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Trent.
Okay, we've got a couple of recent questions. These are really great. Kevin Jenkins asks, what is one critical soft skill needed for future leaders combating both AI and technological developments?
I'll just throw out something to start. I think it's how you can explain how those kinds of developments can be tools and used in our favor. And so as an example, I know that like some of these like ChatGPT and things like that, if you throw a prompt at it like, hey, make this a 6th grade reading level, it can do a really good job of that. And in our work, we get lots of feedback from partners that are like readability, like accessibility, all those kinds of things. So for us, one of the ways it will change the way we're doing the work already is how members of our team can use that to develop new ideas, double check, like, are there other ways of saying that sentence that might be more accessible? Like it could be a really helpful tool versus it could be I don't have a lot of hair, but the hair on fire, oh my gosh, AI is coming for all our jobs, like version of that, which it could feel like. And so I think being realistic and thoughtful as a team and as a leader of like, what are the first steps we can do to become familiar with this technology change? How can it help us? How do we think longer term about some of those changes? Is at least one thing that comes to mind because it's something we're thinking about a lot because of the work that we do and like that specific example.
To me, it's communication and collaboration. I mean, if you combine the technology advances with the future of work and the remote working and just the importance of being able to ensure that the messaging is getting out across the team and making sure that people are collaborating will be the key soft skill.
And I'd add, all right, I'll go ahead. I would add, it's the idea of staying curious. I just recently was interviewing a couple of SVPs at companies and I asked them, what's the differentiator when you've got 2 really strong candidates? And they actually pay attention to what are the questions that they're asking. And if they're staying curious, then they're going to learn about AI, for example, based on what Mike said. So I would add curiosity to the mix.
Okay, one real quick specific question. Thinking about being a late career switcher, do you have any particular advice for folks that are taking a late pivot?
I think one thing is embracing some of the strengths that are coming from your old field that you're bringing to the new one. So like folks in our area who might come to us from more of a marketing advertising background, they might not know a bunch of the public health stuff that other people on the team have, but now they might know a lot more about Google SEO and analytics and like the advertising comm part of what we do. And so I think it's both looking for the skills that you don't have, but not forgetting like you have all kinds of stuff in your favor that like a normal person or an existing professional in that field you're trying to get into, like they might not have. And so like identifying those as strengths that you can build on can help you stand out when you're eventually kind of breaking into that new field.
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of military veterans who are trying to transition out. And as Sarita, I know you know this well, but identifying those transferable skills that they can apply to a civilian role after 20 years plus in the military.
And then also just adding to that, what is the area that you want to switch into and what do they need? And how do you translate your skills over? And we call this your value proposition, which really like looks at your top 3 skills that are important in the marketplace, depending on what you want to do.
Only other thing I'll add, so I think of one very tactical piece of advice, and that is, it kind of goes to value proposition. So what is the story that you're going to tell companies in your new industry? And because you have to be able to really articulate how you're leveraging your knowledge and skills of a particular area and how that's differentiating for where you're going now. And I guess secondly, I guess a little bit more philosophically, I think this kind of goes to, core features of creativity. One of the hallmarks of researching creativity is the ability to combine sets of ideas in unique ways. Well, if you have a wealth of experience in one job type or one industry, well, it's not like you should just let that go. It's not going to be irrelevant for where you're going next. So a question could be how you could leverage that and combine it with what you're learning in this new career in order to provide something of real value. And so some of that takes, both reflection time and, as Sarita mentioned, a little bit of storytelling in that. But it's also really specific to the program. So if you have a background in consumer products and now you're going into technology, well, there's a lot of similarities for how you manage products in that way. So how can you take, the management of a potato chip company and then infuse that for ChatGPT as a product that you're then going to sell? Well, there's some places where it wouldn't apply at all, but there's also some really creative approaches you could take with, not letting go or forgetting what you've learned before.
Great. Thank you all very much. I think we've gotten to the end of the questions and almost the end of the hour. So thanks everyone for participating, for joining the webinar. More information about each of our panelists is being shown right now. Sarita, thank you for moderating too. If anyone has any last words of advice, you can share them now.
Come to UT, it's great.
That's exactly right. Okay.
Thanks everyone for coming. It was fun great questions. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh man, what Ethan said, and I just appreciate the chance to be here with you all today.
Yeah, then just crush it wherever you are and whatever you're doing. So thank you. I very much enjoyed this.
Thanks, everybody.